Undead and Married is a romantic vampire cozy mystery and is book one in Andy Lowe's Blood Bond Agency series. The series is published by Squabbling Sparrows Press and is also available in ebook and paperback.
Chapter 28. Not wanting to draw attention to their vehicle, Dominik maintained his speed. Despite this, all four policemen followed their progress as they passed by the large front gates and on up the road and around the corner. The police presence said one thing and one thing only. Their incursion the night before hadn't gone unnoticed. The police weren't there to arrest Sebastian for murder, nor were they carrying out an investigation into the latest killing. There wasn't so much as a chalk outline on the road where they'd found the young woman. There'd also been nothing in the papers that morning. As if all this weren't enough, it wasn't possible to carry out a murder investigation when you were sitting on your rear end in a parked car. Rather than leave the van in the siding they'd used on their last daytime incursion, Dominik drove further up the road, eventually parking behind a derelict home. They would have farther to walk, but the vehicle should be safe from discovery. Eva drained the rest of her caffeinated blood, tucking the cup safely in her cup holder. She didn't wait for Dominik to come around and open the door for her, swinging it wide and jumping out unaided. Hearing the back doors of the van open, she walked around and joined the others. There she was handed a plastic-wrapped parcel of clothing. And hideous clothing at that, with hospital green not doing anyone a favor, even hunky surgeons in hospital dramas. It was a good thing today's outing had nothing to do with fashion. Eva and Magda walked over to the back door of the old house and smashed it in. Away from the men, they changed quickly, with neither woman happy with their overall look. Magda ran her hands down the ill-fitting tunic and pants that made up the uniform of a local cleaning franchise, whose services Sebastian used. She then straightened the matching headscarf. It is hideous. Eva had to agree, pleased there weren't any mirrors around. Not that she was a fashion victim, but that they were hideous, the fabric having more in common with fossil fuels than natural fibers. The static on the walk-over would be hideous. Her own clothes folded in a neat bundle, she picked them up and she and Magda returned to the vehicle. Their arrival was met with muted guffaws by the two men. Instead of being dressed in affronts to fashion, they were decked out in crisp black uniforms, a multitude of weapons hanging from their belts. They were also a perfect match for the guards they'd seen the night of the party at Sebastian's. The difference was Luca and Dominik didn't need the weaponry, with their own skills more lethal than any man-made defense. When Luca handed Magda a feather duster, the men broke into open laughter. On her snapping the wooden handle between her thumb and forefinger, any laughter on the men's part came to a sudden halt. Could it be because Magda was now effectively armed with a wooden stake that had them on edge? Now it was the turn of the women to laugh, with there being no chance Magda would kill Luca. If she did, she could risk dying herself from a broken heart. It was also something that gave Eva pause. If she was blood bonded to Sebastian, she knew she could take him out. There had to be love in the bond for it to hold, as it did with Magda and Luca. Sure, an unwanted partner could share your power, but love was the ultimate when being truly blood-bound. Their clothes safely stowed in the van, Dominik locked the doors, and they trooped into the safety of the forest. Despite the trees growing close together, they made for the back of Sebastian's property as the crow flew. Their senses being supernatural, there wasn't a chance they could get lost. Sure enough, a deep sniff, and Eva picked up the scent of donuts. How typical of Captain Hugo's lot that they were sitting out front stuffing their faces. They should look for whoever murdered that poor girl, even if this proved to be Captain Hugo. The closer they got to the high wall surrounding Sebastian's compound, the stronger the scent of sugar. It was enough to put Eva's teeth on edge. On the plus side, it took her mind off the static their forced march through the forest had created in her hideous uniform. How on earth did the people employed by the cleaning company avoid this in their day-to-day activities? Or did they use it to collect lint when they were cleaning? Dominik, who was in front of her, glanced back over his shoulder. What's so funny? Nothing. Eva had to fight another giggle at thoughts of being covered in enough lint to be mistaken for the abominable snowman. Nothing at all. Eventually, they stood as a group under the wall at the back of the property. It was a place Eva and Dominik had scoped out the night of the meet and eat while walking hand in hand through the manicured gardens. Designed to look like a romantic stroll, it was anything but. Instead, they'd been on the lookout for the perfect spot to scale the wall. One where they wouldn't be seen from any of the various lookouts around the property was their best hope. There had been no guards in evidence the night before, with none necessary, thanks to the place crawling with alert vampires. But with anyone with fangs out for the count during the daylight hours, she suspected the place would now be overrun by armed guards. Or possibly even members of the local police force. Dominik leaned down next to her. "Are you ready?" he whispered in her ear, causing a response she'd best not examine right now. His whispering was down to there being at least one vampire on the premises who was awake. No one half asleep would have been able to pass them as neatly as the Mercedes had on the narrow road. Eva gave him a brief nod before turning to look at Luca and Magda. Like her, they conveyed their readiness. The four of them then lined up facing the wall and jumped as one, landing lightly atop the wall. They were there for the blink of an eye before jumping to land at the base of the tree that concealed them from the rest of the property. After a lot of pointing and gesturing, they split up as agreed. Luca and Dominik marched off in opposite directions, sticking close to the wall as if guarding the perimeter. There wasn't an ounce of subterfuge in their actions, they were hiding in plain sight. Magda and Eva likewise marched openly over to the back of the building, only going their separate ways when they got there. The blonde was to scout about trying to find any hard evidence that would pin the murders on Sebastian. Anything she found would be passed on to the area commissioner of police. At least this way, they'd know the evidence wouldn't conveniently disappear. With Captain Hugo trying to pin the murder of the young girl on Dominik and the body then disappearing, there wasn't a chance they could trust the man. He had his own agenda, and it was one that didn't tie in with theirs. The other thing they needed to know was how Sebastian was paying for all those flashy cars. While money was changing hands, none of it was going near the banking system. Lilith wasn't able to find anything electronically, meaning they'd have to find any evidence the old-fashioned way. While hard to believe, some vampires, unable to grasp modern technology, still preferred paper records. If Eva and the others could locate the source of the money, then this could help solve a lot of crimes, if not all of them. Of the four of them, Eva had one mission and one only, the retrieval of the chronicle. She made a beeline for an open basement window. It was one she and Dominik had left open a crack the previous evening, and she was pleased to see it was still ajar. This was so much quieter and easier than breaking the window. After opening her senses, she checked the room beyond to see if it was empty, pleased to detect nothing untoward. She crouched down and slid open the narrow window before clambering through. Safely inside, Eva dusted herself off. For all the good it did, thanks to the nylon uniform. In the end, she gave up trying to remove the bits and pieces that had attached themselves to the tunic and pants. Rather, she grabbed one of the cleaning carts parked up in the utilitarian room and steered it over to the door. After calming herself, she eased the door open, straightened her shoulders, and steered the awkward trolley out into the hallway beyond. Now all she needed to do was get over to the storage closet where the chronicle was stashed, grab it, and get out of there. And preferably without having to do any actual cleaning while she was about it. Her journey through the large home went smoothly until she pushed the cart along the hallway that led to the entrance to Sebastian's sleeping chamber. As before, there were 2 guards stationed on either side of the doorway. This time they were human and they were armed. Rather heavily. As tempting as it was to swing the cart around and head away from them, Eva marched stoically forward. She could sense the chronicle was still where they'd hidden it, and she wasn't leaving without it. It took all her nerve to keep walking forward, even waving gaily at the 2 guards as though she had every right to be there. Neither man returned the gesture or her bright smile, with her own faltering in response. It didn't matter how fast she was and how quickly she healed. She did not want to be on the receiving end of this much firepower. Lucky for her, she reached the storage closet doorway with no guns being pointed in her direction. Again, she had to keep herself in check to open the door and slowly push her cart inside, acting like she was simply carrying out her day-to-day duties. Any stealth on her part vanished the moment she shut the door behind her. She scaled the shelves like an acrobat and grabbed the chronicle. It was safely stowed under a pile of dirty towels on her cart when the door was wrenched open behind her. On turning, she expected to see a guard, even holding a bottle of disinfectant, her excuse for being in there. It was one she dropped in surprise. She wasn't faced with either man. Nor was it a man. On the bright side, at least she knew who the driver of the Mercedes was. Chapter 29. Eva's eyes widened as she took in the unknown vampire, absorbing every detail of him, from his immaculate suit to his obviously designer footwear. There was something familiar about him. She'd seen him somewhere before, but where? You'd think she'd remember someone as good-looking, even if he wasn't as cute as Dominik, simply more polished, more urbane. All she knew was he wasn't her friend, and he was strong, very strong. Despite the magic rolling off him in waves, she still knew he was a hematite. It was something she'd known the moment he opened the door, with no nouveau sang up and about during the day, and definitely not one as alert as this guy. It was a good thing she'd automatically thrown up a wall of energy that, all going well, would have him thinking she was human. To her advantage was he didn't appear able to manipulate energy as she and the other three could. Eva further enforced this by playing her part of simply being the hired help to the hilt. "Can I help you?" His eyes narrowed and he glared at her, his anger hitting her carefully erected wall of energy as a physical thing. "What are you doing in this part of the building?" Eva wrung her hands together in what she hoped was a close assimilation of terror, not having to try as hard as she usually would. The guy was scary. I came to get more supplies." She jerked her head wildly at the bottle lying on the floor next to her feet. "Take it and go." He didn't need to tell her twice. Eva grabbed the bottle as quickly as she suspected a terrified cleaner would. Perhaps too quickly. She didn't allow herself to think about it, instead shoving the spray bottle and the caddy atop her cart and pushing it forward. She'd been brought up short, with him not moving from his spot, blocking the doorway. Now what was she supposed to do? Run him over with the cart? As tempting as it was, she wasn't willing to give up on her pretense too soon. Instead, she glanced at him, before dropping her gaze as if to avoid his. Demure. Terrified. The hired help. Human. She waited, her energy barrier rigidly maintained, her eyes downcast. It took longer than it should have for him to move to the side, allowing her to leave the room. She was relieved when he backed away toward the two guards, who strangely hadn't moved from their assigned posts. Her path down the hallway was unobstructed, and she moved off slowly. Unfortunately, rather than dismissing her as unimportant, he followed her progress, something she could tell even without turning. Again, it took every ounce of her self-control not to break into a run, to keep her pace even and slow. To resist pushing the trolley faster than a female human ever could. She was nearing the end of the hall when there came a loud wait from behind her. It was too clear to be human. It was also much closer than she'd have liked. The one plus in all of this was that the mystery hematite was between her and the armed guards, lessening the chances of her being shot. It was a chance she would have to take. Eva let go of the trolley and spun, all the while releasing every ounce of energy at her disposal. Thanks to her having so recently received a double dose of George's plasma, this was considerable. The mystery hematite who was closing in on her was flung back down the hall, smashing into the two guards. She didn't wait to see what damage she'd done. Reaching into the trolley, she grabbed the chronicle from under the towels and took off, all the while calling out to Dominik at an energetic level. Despite them being related, she didn't know if he could hear her. Nor could she rely on him, saving her from what would now be one furious hematite. She didn't bother exiting the building through the basement window, worried it would slow her down. Instead, she'd flown up the stairs and into the main part of the house. There she paused briefly, allowing her senses to spread out, combing the property. The cops were still out front, but she doubted they'd be much help against an enraged vampire. There was also a bigger chance they were on the payroll, effectively making them foe rather than friend. At that moment, she latched onto Dominik's energy signature. It was strong. Strong enough that if she were to risk closing her eyes, she suspected she could see him in her mind's eye. However, now was not the time to experiment with that. And sensing the hematite from the basement closing in on her, she wasn't given a chance. Eva rocketed forward, all her energies now on moving as fast as she could toward Dominik. She was relieved on hurtling around the back of the large home to see him right in front of her. Even better was that Luca and Magda were with him. Still, Eva didn't slow. The chronicle hugged tight to her chest. "Incoming!" she yelled as she raced by, not slowing until she was at the bottom of the wall. And she didn't wait there either, jumping high enough that she cleared it, landing safely on the other side. Of course she would have loved to stay and help the others, but she couldn't. The vampire they were now fighting couldn't get his hands on the chronicle. This would lead to a vampire war and certain death, hers at the hands of her grandmother. As tempting as it was to run through the forest to the black van, Eva headed in the other direction. She jumped down cliff after cliff until she reached the bottom of the valley. Only then could she sprint along the riverbank into town. Again, she was moving faster than she ever had, with the static generated by the nylon cleaner's uniform producing enough heat to burn small holes in places. Despite not encountering a single soul on her return to the blood bond agency, her heart didn't leave her mouth until she was safely inside. Her relief at finding Angel's and Dominik's forms inside the front cover when checking the relic's energetic integrity was immense. Since the crypt had already proven to be unsafe, it would be madness to put the chronicle back there. There was also the not-so-minor issue of her being unable to open the crypt door. It was a problem for another time, and one that didn't bother her as much as it should have. With no time to waste, she'd instead stuffed the chronicle in her walk-in wardrobe, changing out of the ruined maid's uniform while she was about it. Thanks to the trouble she had finding things in her wardrobe, it was the perfect hiding spot until she could find somewhere more secure. To add an extra layer of security, Eva pulled half a dozen dresses off their hangers and tossed them atop the book. Haphazard, with the disarray a perfect match to the rest of her wardrobe. With the chronicle as safe as she could make it, she locked the door to her sleeping chamber and made her way to the garage. A brief look at Gertie the purple van, and she decided she could make it back to Sebastian's property, as fast on foot as in the retro vehicle. Perhaps even faster. Definitely faster. She returned the way she'd come, and on reaching the high wall was surprised to be met with the sounds of fighting. Who on earth was the mystery hematite that he could hold out against vampires as strong as Magda and Luca, but especially Dominik? It was time for her to find out. Dropping into a deep squat, Eva put all her energy into her legs, shooting up and forward over the wall. Rather than landing beside it, she positioned herself behind the others, immediately latching onto Dominik's energy. Then something strange happened. She did the same thing with Magda. And even Luca. The four of them were now joined at an energetic level, even if Eva and Dominik controlled most of that power. No matter the split, they blasted the mystery vampire with everything they had. Enough to see him flat on his back, unconscious. Magda then took advantage of his state to secure him with handcuffs she'd pulled out of nowhere. Rather than be police issue, they had strange markings etched into their surface, and didn't look to be iron, but a strange metal Eva hadn't seen before. The other anomaly was that the minute Magda snapped them in place, the vampire deflated before their eyes. He was smaller, weaker, and less impressive physically, possibly even human. In his current state, Eva thought she could even take him out on her own. This hadn't stopped her from keeping a wary eye on him, fully expecting him to jump up any second, but he stayed right where he was. The other odd thing was that he no longer looked familiar to her. Perhaps it had been a trick of the light downstairs. She turned and looked at Magda. "What on earth did you do to him?" The stunning blonde waved her beautifully manicured hands around as if it was nothing. "Took advantage of something we picked up at All Hallows Keep, that's all." All Hallows Keep? Rather than stay out in the open where the police out front might see them, Luca and Dominik dragged the unconscious vampire over to the house. Along the way, Magda explained that All Hallows Keep was a prison for paranormal beings. Located as it was in an alternative universe, it was no wonder Eva had never heard of it. On explaining the eccentricities of the establishment, Magda let slip a couple of things that had Dominik and Luca staring at her in horror. It took Eva a second to get the full story from the snippets. Wait, you mean Natalia? She hadn't had time to voice her theory before Dominik had gently placed his free hand over her mouth. Some things are better left unsaid. Do you not agree? Boy, oh boy, did she ever. If word were to get out that... She shut her brain down, doing her best to rid it of the mayhem that could ensue. Images of her grandmother decked out like some sort of vampiric Valkyrie were harder to banish. They were standing in the large glass-fronted atrium, deciding on the best course of action, when Eva remembered something strange. Guys, when I was downstairs getting the Chronicle, there were a couple of humans guarding Sebastian's sleeping quarters. Not getting a reaction out of them, Eva continued. They never moved once. Not even when our mystery hematite was after me. Were they frozen or something? Asked Luca. Eva had pondered for a moment. No, they weren't. When I waved, one of them waved back. Robotic, though. A quick confab had confirmed that other than the two guards and the now deflated vampire, no one had seen a soul, dearly departed or otherwise. The place was as good as deserted. Dominik frowned when they stood at the top of the steps leading to the basement. That's weird. Something's not right and we need to know what. Or should that be whom? Eva was all for this. With the Chronicle safe, they could now concentrate on seeing who was guilty of the murders in the town. Too many young women had died, and for what? The four of them made their way quietly down the stairs, their energy still linked as it was when they'd overpowered the vampire outside. This allowed them to know the two guards were still standing sentry at the doorway leading to Sebastian's sleeping chamber. A quick burst of combined energy resulted in two unconscious guards at the end of the hallway. Although they weren't there for long, with Magda and Luca taking care of stuffing them in the much-used storage closet. Only then had they slowly opened the door and inched down the stairs to Sebastian's sleeping chamber. They'd stopped on the half-landing, all of them listening intently. The first thing they'd picked up was Sebastian's loud snoring. The second was an all-too-familiar gurgling. Eva would know that sound anywhere. Were they too late again? Speed being of the essence, all four eschewed the last flight of stairs, flying into Sebastian's sleeping chamber in a blur. The scene facing them wasn't what they were expecting. Instead of finding Sebastian tucked up with another young woman, her throat ripped out, he was alone. A quick scan of the room, and Eva found the source of the noises. She knew Captain Hugo was involved with Sebastian at some level. But not like this. Anything but this.
If you've enjoyed these chapters, we'd love it if you could give them a thumbs up. And if you'd like to continue the story, you can subscribe and tap the bell to be notified when the next chapter is released.